Hey guys, welcome to the Tetra Health and Performance Podcast. I know why you're here. You're here because your gains are slowing down. You can't see the progress anymore. And you're saying, guys, James, Mitch, help me. How do I make these gains? Well, stay with us. We've got you, man. We're going to go through some of the biggest impacts that are affecting your progress. And we're going to slowly start to rattle them off one by one. So stay tuned, stay with us.
Yeah, there's so many reasons why you might not be making progress, or you might be plateauing, right? And we do consider a plateau to be about 2 weeks of making no improvement whatsoever. And we've kind of come up with what we think are the four main reasons you're not making progress. And obviously, I just said, there's so many different reasons that it could be, and we've tried to kind of like categorize or put them under subjects. And the first one, number one, is you're listening to dumb shit. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's think of it like this: you're too concerned with exercise selection, you're too concerned with perfectionism, your diet is too complex. You think supplements will get you gains, and even at the end of the day, steroids, if you take them, still need hard work to actually get results. So let's touch on this a little bit more, Mitch. Like
Bro,
we see this a lot, right?
yeah, man. And like we're in this like digital media like kind of age at the moment where we're getting messages left, right, and center. I get it. Sometimes we look to individuals with large audiences or whatever it happens to be for like health tips or lifestyle tips and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes this gets too convoluted.
Yeah.
Like you've got to know what your goals and tasks are, and you got to know what the big rocks are, the big things that move the wheel, not the small little nuancy things that look shiny and look fun.
And it is the nature of the beast that social media now is trying to get a message across faster and faster, and the algorithms like they make this worse. Where what happens is where we used to probably have like a 2 minute window, 3 minute, people's attention would be pulled into something for 5-10 minutes, where we can actually explain something, and we can discuss kind of the good, the bad, why, and who this is important to. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to find that you have a lot of people who put a message out well, and they haven't really thought hard enough about that message, and that message can be kind of like overly simplified and really quick to a point, actually causing more damage than good. And let me give you an example of this where think of an exercise, for example. Well, when we program, we're looking at an exercise as what is going to do best inside a program, and we're really not concerned with the exercise as its individual part, but we are concerned with the exercise and where it fits in a big scheme of things. But someone's going to not get clicks if they actually explain it to you. You'll be bored within a couple of seconds, and you're probably not going to give them that 10 seconds and that like or that save on their post. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, "This is the exercise you have to do to get gains. This is
Mm.
the only exercise that's going to build your shoulder, your back, or whatnot." And from this, and then we find people who probably are overly concerned with the exercise selection, not paying enough attention to actually working hard in their programs.
And you know what? We have different goals and needs to maybe what we're viewing or to someone we're trying to listen to. You've got your own anthropometrics, you've got your own kind of injury history, your own kind of specialization that may be needed to say this is the one movement for you to make progress. You know what, man? It's like loading up that shotgun and you just point it out there to your audience and bam, you just hope something hits. But what you don't hear about is the ones that don't hit, right? The ones that exacerbated an issue and caused an injury, or the ones that just had no effect to the individual or no effect to the individual. All you do is you hear about like that 1 in 100, like, yeah, this was pretty cool. This fit me and I got some progress with it.
Yeah, and that happens for the good and for the bad as well. Like where people might say, "Well, this exercise is the best exercise for this." There's also going to be a lot, and we see it all the time on social medias or just in general, where people say, "Well, don't do this exercise." And most of the time, not enough thought has gone into why you just wouldn't do an exercise in particular, and then we get this kind of fear mongering, and we slowly, I think, we create a barrier of entry or a knowledge barrier in training where people have already started taking away too many things from their training routine that could be really be doing them benefit, or might, like Mitch mentioned, anthropometrics, which is kind of like the measure of people's different shapes and arms, legs, limbs, and so on to the torso. Well, it might be actually the perfect exercise for one person. And we do find that anecdotal evidence in the industry is really, really quite dangerous, because what we find is coaches, because it worked for them, seem to then put out, "This is the thing you should be doing. This worked for me." And sometimes they're be on steroids, they're be enhanced, or or they just have the body type that represents that exercise as being good for them. And this stuff is too complex to be discussed in such a short period of time on a 20-second reel on Instagram.
Yep, straight up.
Yeah.
And like we're talking exercise selection as like one of them, but like you can apply this to like nutrition when they say like you're gonna eat these bloody fucking berries that were found in the bloody Hindu mountains in this little fucking hidden cave that only we have access to, and they speed up your metabolism 300%. Calling BS on that, but you know what will probably work for you? A more structured diet orientated to your goals and all that sort of stuff. But anything with these grand claims, well, you know what? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Back this shit up. Show me how it works and show me with what different people. How did you test it? All these sorts of stuff. And you can apply that to an exercise. Like, show me why this gives benefit and give me more context behind it. And show me the context of your program to why this movement worked or whatever supplement it happens to be promoting, show me the context to why this supplement works as well, not just it will change your life 180 degrees if you have this bloody supplement that costs $1,000. Anyway, ranting.
Yep.
It's kind of going off,
And
but you
with
kind of get
that,
what I mean
yeah,
with that.
and with that again, we get this confusion around nutrition, where we have things that we really feel we have to put into our diet, and what are we replacing that might be better is the question. And also we have things that are kind of like demonized that people take out of their diet, and all of a sudden their diet becomes this kind of smaller window of perfection that they have to achieve. When really, when we kind of understand these big foundational points with nutrition and training, then we can get much better results. And kind of that's what we want to get across today as much as possible, is how make sure you're getting the big bang for your buck stuff done. And then once you've done that for a while, then you can start paying more attention to your smaller, minute things that make that 1-2% difference. Right?
This is the old signal and noise, right? That so much noise through social media, through your mates and all that sort of stuff. We hear so much advice and so many things that we think resonate to us. But being able to dial into exactly what we need to listen to, that signal, and that's where we can kind of chime in a little bit and find out what we really need to do to affect our results
Yeah.
and get us where we need to go.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that like there was a while back when obviously the internet has come out, and you'd have trainers being, and when social media comes out and all this information is going out, and you'd have trainers being, oh god, like this kind of scary because there's so much good information coming out. But the sad thing is there is a lot of good information out there, but it's mostly hidden by lots of terrible information. So it's kind of the coach, like listen to your coach if you have a good coach, and their job is to filter through that for you, and like watch the stuff, get good understanding. And we get it all the time. Sometimes I have someone come up to me and ask me a question about what they've seen on social media, and I say, "Oh, well, yeah, that's actually an awesome point, but I don't think that would work for you because of ABC." Or sometimes I'll say, "Okay, that's good. Yeah, do that instead. That's fine." Like, but you have to have that kind of knowledge. You have to have that understanding enough, and have seen enough things, and have learned enough to actually decide when or not something is appropriate for the individual. That's what it comes down to: the right thing for the right individual.
Bro, I remember when like one of the best resources in the early 2000s when the net was just starting to get cool with health and fitness was bloody bodybuilding.com. When the forums of bodybuilding.com were gold mines, just like reading bros, giving bros advice. Then you would have all sorts of shit being thrown out there. But man, I was like early 2000s, I was young. I gave a bunch of it a go. Some of it stuck, some of it didn't. And then you know what? Then probably the next one that came up from bodybuilding.com, which was like ground baking, was like T Nation. And that's where it got a little bit more specificity because you started getting specialists, kind of getting a bit of a lens talking about like solid topics of powerlifting, Olympic lifting, whatever, and actually giving a little bit more accurate advice. And that was revolutionary. That was so cool to be soaking in that information.
And with that, I find one of the most dangerous things about that kind of information and anecdotal information is sometimes someone didn't get the results from this new program they're doing now. They actually got the results from lots of things they did in the past. And I think that's something that people often like lose sight of, is that there's no one in like Mitch said there, is that he actually spent a lot of time choosing things, doing things and being like, okay, well that didn't work for me, that did work. Well, the biggest issue is when people start on that kind of journey, they don't survive long enough along the journey. Most people don't, to actually choose what actually worked for them and or not. And they end up actually being disheartened throughout the process because they're like, oh, well, everything I've been doing the last 3-4 times doesn't work. And diet's such a good explanation of this. And we see it all the time. So someone doesn't understand that really it's going to come down to calories. It's going to come down to either being in a surplus or deficit, depending on the results you want to get. And what they actually end up doing is they go through things like they do keto, they do Atkins, they do I don't know, high carb, high fat, low fat, all that stuff, and none of it actually worked for them. And they think that the issue is that just nothing can work for them. They start blaming things on hormones, and the issue is that they haven't actually used the foundational information of just being like, I need to be in a calorie surplus or a deficit to get my results. Yep, and we see that with exercise all the time. And Mitch can say he can stand there, having trained for 15 years, he can say that this didn't work, this did work, this didn't work, this did work, and he has enough information to back up maybe why it didn't work. He might be, okay, well, I didn't actually adhere to that because I didn't like it. Okay, well, all right, that did work. Well, because I liked it and I did it for months longer. Yeah, or that just didn't work because that was actually a terrible program that fatigued me too much, and I just didn't want to go in and train again the next day. And these are all things that you have to kind of build up over time. Like all these things play into why you aren't making results. It's kind of like, and inside, without getting sidetracked, inside are four main reasons you're not making progress. Is number one, don't listen to dumb shit, and number two,
Drum roll, drum roll.
nutrition. Yep. Number three, adherence, and number four, programming. And this is what we'll get a little bit more into. We'll get off the stop listening to dumb shit for a bit, and we'll move over to nutrition for a little while. I think because I kind of segued into that,
Yeah.
right?
And this is contextual, right? What are your goals? Will depend on how your nutrition is influenced, right? So obviously, if you are trying to build a bit of mass, we need to be eating a bit more food and be in that surplus. We do have whole potties dedicated to this. So if you are like, hey, you know what, I am trying to put on some weight, we've got a whole like one of getting stronger and putting on some weight you can listen to. If fat loss is like your goal, again, we've got a podcast fully dedicated to that, breaking that down. Again, nutrition is going to be contextual, right? What are my goals? What are my personal preferences? And that's going to kind of dictate how you're going to use fuel to support your training goals.
Yeah,
Eh,
100%. It's gonna need to be sustainable. We find so often people put themselves into this really low calorie. Like so, obviously, like, do you want if you do want to lose body fat, then you often find that people put them into themselves into these really low calorie diets too quickly, and then what happens is just not sustainable, or it is sustainable, but you just don't like your life like that, right? And then what happens is you can't do it for longer. So it's not actually your fault. It's the fact that it's pretty bad advice somewhere along the lines because you don't have to instantly go into the lowest calorie diet. And then when you are in a kind of like a sub low calorie diet, we won't get into the numbers because, like Mitch said, that's all in other podcasts. Then what you'll find is that you can adjust things. So if you are going into a low calorie diet and you just go, okay, well, that doesn't work for me when I eat rice and meat. So I need to zhuzh it up a little bit, right? So you can do that. Like you can be that type of person. I'm not that type of person that much. I can eat the same thing every single day. It's kind of like a gift. But some people actually need to have exciting food. Well, they have to go down that path, right? They have to find the way of having that calorie deficit with the exciting foods in front of them. Some people can eat that same exciting meal all the time. Well, some people can't. Some people need to change it up all the time. So you gotta actually look at yourself, what you need inside a diet. Stop following a cookie cutter and be like, okay, well, I need this when I eat. I know yourself, right? Like I know that I like to eat these foods all the time. Well, make sure them foods are in that diet and stop listening to the person that's telling you to eat chicken and rice, right?
Yep, 100%, man. Why do something that kind of sucks and makes you miserable? It has to be enjoyment. There's
Yeah,
so much diversity and variety out there in the food world. You can find something that resonates with you and matches your goals at the same time. Just might means it's not just because it's categorized doesn't mean it's correct. Just because it's there's a system out there for intermittent bloody fasting, that's what it's called. The carnivore diet, bloody Atkins diet. Just because these have been systemized to eliminate certain food groups doesn't mean they're correct. You can still make this personalized to you in any context, whether it be weight gain or fat loss.
yeah, and like you look at your energy levels while you're actually eating these foods, and say for example, someone's told you, oh, quinoa is the perfect food for weight loss, but you hate it. Well, it's not your perfect food for weight loss. Say for example, someone's told you like mashed potato is also awesome for bulking, but you start eating lots of it and it fills you up really quickly. Well, it's not the best food. It's not the best food for you when it comes to bulking. So you have to look at your energy levels. You have to look at how it makes you feel afterwards, and it's quite easy to navigate with a coach's assistance on the side. These kind of nutrition rules.
Shout out to mashed potato. How bloody good.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love mashed potato? Seriously.
Well, yeah. So like for me, I
Oh,
love.
don't know
I
you.
really love mashed potato. I love potato. I was like brought up on potatoes pretty much, but like, um,
Raised by potatoes.
but the whole idea is I kind of like the rule that if when I'm bulking and we're gonna have like more minced meats, like 'cause they're easy to eat fast and get them down and not fill up so quickly. And I'm going to have more kind of like mashed potatoes and like your easier to eat potatoes. And then when I'm kind of cutting, I find that you're just going to have a whole steak and or that whole piece of chicken where you have to cut it up yourself and it slows you down eating. And then I'm going to have like kind of my roast potatoes, or I'm going to have like new potatoes or something like that, or a jacket potato that actually takes a little bit longer to eat. And they're little tricks that can really help, and doesn't always help each individual, but this is what we're getting on is like what most people don't do is they don't actually work enough on their nutrition to get the results. And the nutrition should match your goals, right? So say for example your goals aren't just um, to put on weight, which most people it isn't. It's actually to put on muscle. Well, then we need to make sure the training is matching up with the nutrition. And I think like it's been said a lot, and maybe it hasn't been said enough recently. But like if you really want goals, the training is not just where it's at. The food is not just where it's at. It has to be a good mixture of the both.
Oh yeah, you know what too? It's kind of cool. Food can be weaponized for training, and I think that's kind of what James is alluding to right there. So, for example, like eat before you train. Have something in your system so you have fuel that your body can use to fuel you to do to help out with the performance of the session. So, say for example, you're coming up to an effort where you got to lift some big ass weights and it's a pretty hard session. Well, I'm going to want some carbs to kind of fuel me up and have some cheap, easy energy that I can use in that session so I can perform at a really high standard. It's going to be hard to have that really intense, hard session when I've got no fuel in my tank to help me out with that. So if you are like performance based with your programming and you're looking to kind of, use food and weaponize it, you can. It can be quite handy pre and post sessions to kind of A, fuel up your performance, and B, speed up your recovery as well. So it's another way you can kind of look at food to match where you are currently at with your training.
And I find as well all the time is how much people misunderstand that nutrition is really where it's at when it comes to the increase in muscle mass or drop in body fat. And the idea is that, for example, it's not in the training as much as you may think. You kind of want to make sure you're doing some kind of strength training all year round. Don't fall into the trap of just burning calories. It drives me absolutely nuts. And I'll give you a really good explanation on why you shouldn't do that, right? A good, if I'm going to say it, so I don't want to say it, I'm going to, good calorie burning session is going to be like what 500, 550 calories max, right? Well, a good strength session is going to get you kind of them 350s, 400s normally anyway, right? So imagine that gap is 150, right? And that is what I'm with that. If I am going to take that chance and I'm going to do all the calorie burning instead, that 150 calorie gap is not worth the lack of the strength and building muscle and all the other benefits of that, right? Because I'm probably not even going to get that much fitter. I'm just burning into calories. So say I got 150 calories extra from that session. Well, if I sleep 8 hours of a day, then I have 16 hours awake, right? 150, 16, we can just say that's roughly 10 calories an hour. Well, do you actually know how easy it is to burn an extra 10 calories an hour? That could be you just standing up at the desk for 10 minutes every hour, right? Which is going to get other health benefits way better than just doing the hour of cardio. It could just be that you cut a little bit out of your snack, like 10 calories you probably wouldn't even notice. It could be that you go for a walk in the day. It could be that you just do that little bit of extra cleaning around the house. It's really quite easy to get the extra 10 calories in the hour, and you're not missing all the gains from the strength session. Yeah, so stop looking at an hour of training as how many calories you burn. Put in as much effort as possible with that strength. Do some conditioning, but make sure it's designed to hit aerobic, anaerobic, and actually improve fitness. Yeah, but stop looking at sessions as calories. And I would run. I would run a million miles if I go anywhere near a gym that says, "Oh, this is a calorie burning session." I would run. Just get away. Like, don't even look them in the eyes. Especially don't look them in the
That's how they capture your
eyes.
soul.
Yeah.
If you make eye contact, I've got you now. Boom,
Yeah.
you're in my stare. Good. I gotta learn that technique, man. That'd be great for sales.
I would. But mate, do you agree?
Oh, 100%, 100%, right? Like, and it's hard to educate on everyone, right? And hopefully that's what this potty is built for, is a bit of education, empowering decisions. But you still get it every now and then. You get members, you got to educate. They chuck their watches on and go, boom, they start tracking. But like, nothing wrong with tracking energy expenditure. But when like the whole point is I just want to get that number as high as I can. That's what James is saying. Then there lies the issue, especially when you want to change your training stimulus for the sole purpose of just upping that calories. But yeah, like
Yeah, say goodbye to results in any other category.
dude, if you want to get that heart rate up, I'll just do like repeated intervals constantly on the bike and just keep spiking that heart rate up relentlessly. But like It's not going to be any fun, and we're not going to get a lot of benefit out of that, and we're leaving so much on the table with our strength development, our movement development, and all that other great stuff that can be done with our strength training. You can get so much more long term out of doing your structured strength conditioning training than you would just go chasing calories.
Yeah, and psychologically, you're making yourself a barrier of improvement because at the end of the day, inside an hour, what's going to happen is when you first start training, you'll be able to burn maybe five. Actually, you know what? When you first start training and you're unfit and you're super inefficient, you might be able to burn 700 calories in a session, right? But then you're going to have to work way harder to burn 710. Okay. But the issue is your body's getting more efficient at the exercise you're doing, yeah, and you're getting fitter. So as you keep looking at calories, that calorie amount that you can burn will drop and it will drop and it will drop. And then you'll get really disheartened because there's actually no way anymore because you are fitter, you're more efficient at exercise, you can actually ever burn 710 calories ever again. And what you're doing is you're telling yourself that actually your goal is unachievable and you're making yourself never want to train again, right? Whereas we can make training way harder when we look at much better numbers of improvement. We can look at the weights that we lift. We can look at the amount of power we can put out on a bike. We can look at how far we can run. Like these are better metrics to gain progress with. And they're actually metrics that you can gain progress with. When it comes to calorie burn, it's not a metric you can continuously make progress with because what? You're going to get lighter. Oh, you're burning less calories when you're lighter. It's just a trap. It's a trap. That's why you don't look the person in the
It's a
eye.
trap.
It's a trap.
It's hard
It's
to
a trap.
it's hard to mic drop when they're
Where's
on a
that from?
supported arm. Oh, mate,
What's
Star
the
Wars.
yeah,
It's
oh, I know it's from Star
yeah,
Wars. I
yeah,
was just
yeah.
waiting for
What's
you
his
to
name?
say
What's
it.
his
Like,
name? Admiral something, the calamari dude.
yeah, calamari.
Yeah, anyway,
They are the
man.
calamari, are they?
They are the
They're actually
calamari.
called the
Yeah, yeah,
calamari
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
when I heard that first time on Star Wars, I was just like, oh wow,
The
okay, we're
calamari,
going
like the
there.
squids.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like, come on, man. We like creativity here. Shall we move on?
yeah.
All right.
So like,
Which one do
this
you
is a good segue, really, because we kind of spoke about like how with calorie burning, you're not going to get anywhere eventually. Well, that's where we want to talk next is adherence, right? So
Mm,
this is the most foundational rule of any training program, any nutrition program, anything that exists. Is the most important thing that you can possibly do is just adhere to the program, right? And when it comes to adherence, like Mitch mentioned earlier, and I touched on, is you've got to like it, you've got to enjoy it, you've got to see progress enough to then be able to stay on the line.
yeah. If you're lamenting the idea of doing whatever set action, it's hard to follow through and do it, right? I think it's so important. Like if you have some pre-built ideas in your head to what like training might be like, or have some inbuilt fears, and I think this is a very normal thing to have happen. Best thing you can do is step in a very safe environment, plan a one-on-one session or just a meet and greet, and I think you'll be surprised how many fears break down very quickly. You meet someone like, hey, they actually seem kind of nice. This place is kind of chill and like it's got a good vibe. Do one or two sessions. Like, wait a minute, you know what? A lot of my fears have been broken down. I feel supported. I feel comfortable. I feel like I've been challenged. And slowly you can build that habit and build more comfort and then start to layer up the complexity with your like intensity and efforts in the session and start to hopefully snowball going forward. But again, like we got to build that trust and rapport first, and then hopefully we start to build that rapport and then snowball with your results.
I love the idea of getting accustomed with your environment as well. It's because we often look at people as like what's the word when you're outgoing? Oh, you're like an
Introverts and
extrovert
extroverts,
or
yeah,
an
yeah.
introvert. We often look at that, right? But we forget that that is actually contextual, right? We forget that like the one person that you meet, like might be quite shy and quiet with you in the environment that you're in, but when they're at home with their family, they might be really loud and outgoing and really like social. And we forget that a lot. And when someone does go into the gym, we might often instantly label them like as timid or shy, and it's just because it's just an environment that they're not used to. And the gym environment can be one of the most intimidating environments of all environments, really, because people lifting heavy weight, slamming heavy metal down on the ground, shouting and like roaring, which yeah, there's
You
not that
just
much
don't
roaring.
know, right? Like if you haven't been in that situation before, it's just all unknowns. And it's so hard to have confidence within yourself when everything is new.
Yeah, and the ability to actually get comfortable with that environment is that there's one way to do it, and it's actually to keep getting in. And one of the cool things is if you want to be someone who's eventually comfortable with your environment in the gym, you just have to get in, and you got to like get in and just do whatever it takes. Just walk around the gym, like just walk on a treadmill, do whatever you like for a bit, get comfortable with the environment. And as you start getting comfortable with the environment, start testing new things out, and or just working a little bit harder, doing a few more reps, doing a little bit heavier weight, or increasing the intensity and what like. And psychologically, that's going to play massively on you actually being able to adhere to a long-term program. And something we see a lot, right? Like very unrealistic expectations. People wanting to jump in and just expect everything to go according to plan straight away, and for them to just move at 100 miles an hour. And maybe that's what happened to you when you went to university. Maybe you were just like, I am an academic. I love this stuff. This is just resonates with me, and I feel so confident in my skin when I'm doing this stuff. Or maybe that's what you're like at your job, or maybe that's what you're like at home. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen instantly when you walk into a gym. And we have to kind of expect that it's going to take a time to kind of understand and appreciate the environment.
And if you can make that first step, just to reiterate the same point, just to step through the door, if you get through the door, like you put your clothes on, you walked or you got in the car, guarantee you, once you step through the door, you're not going to regret it. Be like, yes, I'm in. You can walk back out. I'm happy you just built the habit. You started to get
Yeah,
here.
100%. Just
But you know what? That's not going to happen. You step through that door, you know what's going to happen. You're going to put your stuff down and just kind of flow on with the session. And next thing you know, you got a massive win. You did a full 40-minute, 50-minute, an hour session. Celebration to you, power to you, dude. And the more you can kind of compound that effort, you know what? You've built a habit. You've built something that's sustainable. And you know what? I bet you've probably started to enjoy it as well. We've
yeah.
seen some progress.
I'm saying you go in the gym and then you started building your confidence up in the gym, and then before you know it, you started chatting to someone, and before you know you've made a friend, and then you make a friend, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're part of a community because you've got 4 or 5 friends and you've got people you're happy to
Hell
see,
yeah.
and now you're going there just because because you love lifting weights and you love moving weight and you love working yourself, but actually because you what you might not always notice is like because you're meeting people and you're enjoying yourself, and that's your part of your kind of like your social week, right? Your social calendar.
It's still my favorite thing being a coach, seeing that individual that might be a little bit timid or maybe hasn't played strength with a bit of strength work. And you see them go through that hardships and then they start to love it. And that there's like that click in them where they don't need to be pushed, they do it themselves. And you're like, you awesome human being,
Yeah,
well done to you.
and it's cool because you see transformations, right? You see the body change, but like you don't just see body transformations. You see like total like social transformations. You see people make friends and become a group and like start chatting outside with people after a session or inside the session. And it's like you see people completely change, like in so many different aspects, rather than just that one. Um, yeah, it's a fun thing to be a fly on the wall with.
And you've got to understand too, shit happens and life happens. So sometimes you might build a bit of momentum and you're like, I'm doing really good, but bam, life gets you right in the jaw. And you're out of action for a week or two. You might get sick, family things, work things, whatever. Life can be crazy. The hard thing then is after you've had some success, and then you might feel the body's gotten tighter, you've gotten a bit stiffer, and you're like, oh my God, we're at a different phase of the program. I don't know what's going on. You've got to start that journey again. And I understand that's really hard. But sometimes reaching out for a bit of support, if you need it through your coach or your support network, can be something to start off with. And just, you got to play that game again. I've just got to get through the door. Because that habit will rebuild so quickly, but you've just got to get that first one in.
Yeah.
If you need support or help, reach out because that's what we personally like to do and support you and try and play carrot or stick or however you resonate and rebuild that up.
Yeah, I had this conversation with a member just last week, and I said I was speaking to them, and they've been making amazing progress recently. And I was speaking to them. I said, "Oh, so how's this week going? I know you've like a few weeks ago you came back from a holiday and so on." They said, I'm having a pretty bad week this week, and I'm just slowly getting back into it." I'm like, "Yeah, but how many sessions have you done this week and last week?" And they're like, "3." I'm like, "Okay, so let's look back 6 months or 7 months ago. Let's say like after you've come back from a holiday, then." How many sessions would you get back when you're saying you had a bad week? And it'd be none or one. Well, I'm like, so this fair enough. That we can still consider this a bad week, but the new norm for you, a bad week, is you're hitting 3 sessions a week. That is nuts. That is like 3 sessions is still enough to get progress.
100%.
Nothing can stop this man now. Like if that stays with him for the next 6, 7 years,
Oh, yeah.
like well, that's a long time. But like say for example 6, 7 years, absolute freak. He'd be an absolute beast because his worst week, right after having a holiday, is 3 sessions in a week.
Yeah, wow.
That's
From averaging
how good is
0 to
that?
1,
Yeah,
that's mad.
yeah. And that's so
Hectic.
like your when your bad weeks, like if you keep going through bad weeks, like Mitch was just saying, you keep getting back in. Before you know it, your bad weeks, what a new bad is much better than what an old bad was. And like whereas an old bad you would be you actually going back, you're regressing because you're so not getting into the gym enough. Your new bad can be I'm moving forward, but I'm just not moving forward as fast as I'd like.
Mm.
Like how cool is that?
Yeah, man. Power to him.
I won't say his name.
And this
I
is
know who he is. He listens.
holler at you if you know who it is. Fantastic. Good man. To catch yourself in a spiral is hard. So like if you know, like I'm not going in, my food started to change, I'm not doing these proactive habits that I know kind of help me out. And I know it's hard because a lot of people sometimes wait till they hit the bottom, then to rebuild themselves up when they're in that spiral. And like that's the perfect time to reach out. One message, one phone call. That's all it takes sometimes just to get out of it, grab that helping hand, and then start pulling you back up. Like can't perform miracles, but we can keep you accountable. We can follow you up and provide a supportive atmosphere. So if you do know you're in that kind of place, reach out, man. Or if you can do it yourself and just step that foot in and be open with your communication, saying, "Hey, I'm back in, but I want to take it slow and I need a bit of support in these areas." That bit of communication sometimes is all it takes for us to have more contextual understanding about yourself and hopefully provide more structure and accountability to you to slowly build you into good and stronger habits.
Yeah,
Uh,
and how much is moving slow like is so much better than not moving at all or
Oh, yeah.
moving backwards. Like, and we forget this because we have so many perfectionists, like so many people who like want to achieve so much so quickly, and they misunderstand that like moving slow for a year is going to be better than like moving fast for 2 weeks and then having the rest of the year off, right? Like it all accumulates, and just like moving slow, just getting in, getting some movement done, not worrying about the session and not worrying about being the strongest person you can be all the time, and actually just getting it done. And that's where adherence really comes in. It's like continuously battling through good times, bad times to get in, and then just slowly build this incredible habit.
Just reiterate this. This is probably the most important point.
It is
like
the most important point.
like 80% of I'm making up a number here, but about 80% of your results will be stemmed on how often you get in, right? Like you can still probably lose weight without training with a really, really awesome diet and nailed diet and good sleep hygiene, all that sort of stuff. You ain't going to be building much muscle mass though if you're not training. But anyway, what I'm saying is adherence is a must and everything's built off it. It's hard to play with your program. It's hard to
But
play with
Mitch,
exercise.
yeah, so like yeah, Mitch said like so that, but that is adherence as well, isn't it? You might so if you want goals, like fair enough, you don't train in the gym, but you still have to adhere to a program. You still have to adhere to a nutrition program, right? So
Mm.
adherence is it.
Ooh,
Like nothing can be done without adherence.
a lot of adherence. Well done, adherence.
Oh, 100%. Like, well, who cares how good a programming is if
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
actually
yeah.
not getting in and doing anything?
Oh, what's the old saying? Like the best program in the world means fucking nothing if you don't actually do it right.
Yeah. Oh,
And
100%.
a shit program can still yield results if you actually get at it and chase it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Results of being broken. I'm joking. I'm joking. No, 100%. No, you're completely right.
um,
So yeah. So next
Beautiful.
point here is programming.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, program. Big things with programming is controlling. So once you're yeah, adhering, you've got your nutrition down. You're not listening to any more dumb shit. And you are paying attention to the volume, intensity, and the frequency of your training to get the to reap the absolute most of a good program, right?
So many things that stem under this umbrella, right? So like programming is having an idea of what you actually want to do, right? So if you know your end goal, we can kind of reverse engineer that and kind of build a plan for you to achieve that. And just kind of flopping around and doing random stuff, it's going to yield some results, but like nothing compared to a bit of structure, baby, and giving a bit of time and thought to how you're going to achieve your goal. Pardon me, and reverse engineering that goal and making sure you are training the athletic attributes that push you towards where you want to go.
Yeah, and I think with programming, like them three words I just touched on, that volume, that intensity, and that frequency, they are incredibly important. And the one thing we see people not do enough or do too much is they pay too much attention to improving them, and they don't again take their time with them. So like volume, for example, is like how much work have you actually done? And when we have volume, we have two things with the volume. We have the actual amount of volume you're doing overall. That could be inside the day, that could be inside the session, that could be inside the week, the month, and the year. And when we talk about adherence, well, they're important things, right? Because I can't just be worrying about how much I did in the day. I need adherence. I need to make sure that I'm doing it again. I'm backing it up over and over again, and I'm accumulating this massive amount of volume. So one session with too much volume could fatigue me too much that I can't then get the frequency that I need of that volume, right? So they all play into each other. The intensity is the same thing. Well, intensity we would kind of register as the most amount of weight you can do, or the hardest you can work inside these lesser reps. And so the most kind of like volume you can get in a very short amount of time. And the same thing is, if I overdo that, then I miss out on the frequency, I miss out on the adherence of training. So there's a fine tuning that needs to always happen. I can't push too hard and then not maintain my adherence, but I shouldn't go too little. And we talk about this a lot. And I think it's so important that people understand these concepts, is that we have this kind of maximal recoverable volume.
Mm.
Yep. That includes intensity as well. They're interchangeable. Um, the maximal recoverable volume, if I do too much, well, my frequency will drop off and I won't be able to get in again to repeat that volume in a dense enough amount of time. And I have a minimal effective volume. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, if you do any less than that, you just don't get gains. And actually, if you do minimal effective volume, you're probably not going to enjoy training because it's going to take too long to get any progress, right? And then in the middle, we have our that's fantastic. In the
Static
middle,
dropped.
we have the maximal adaptive volume, right? So minimal adaptive volume. Well, that is the sweet spot if you ever training, because that means that you're going to continuously be able to see results. You probably won't plateau in that kind of 2 week point that we spoke about. And what you do is you'll build the adherence because you're continuously tracking and seeing these nice little bits of progress.
This depends on where you're at with your journey as well. Like all those things matter greatly. But as a beginner, like if you've never touched a weight before, you've never had any type of structure before, like the basics work. Like having a rough idea of intensity and the movement and movement quality and that sort of stuff, adaptation will happen pretty damn quick. Like if you've never touched it, you'll notice like, hey, my body's pretty changing. But as you train more and more, you need to understand these principles in greater depth. You need to know how to you need to know what intensity is for starters. You need to start to experience what it feels like to have one rep in reserve and know what intensity means, so you can then judge your reps in reserve and match the right intensity to whatever the program's trying to elicit.
And as I mentioned, and if you flip this round, right, to stop listening to dumb shit, you'll find that well, we mentioned how people often are putting out programs to people, or just not even programs, are putting out this one individual exercise. You also feel how often people discuss this godlike effect of rep schemes
Mm.
as well. Like, oh, so this is the rep scheme that you must do. And sometimes the biggest mistake they make is they don't even touch on reps in reserve. So
Mm.
also, can you say that 12 reps is going to work for everyone if you don't mention reps in reserve? Because reps in reserve being like, oh, I do 8 reps and I could only do 9 means I have one more rep in reserve, right? That means I have an intensity really high. That'd be like 95% intensity. Well, if I said 12 reps to one person, they go pick up a 20-kilo dumbbell and they do 12 reps, but they could do 10 more. Well, that's not high enough intensity for them to get any results. And I think that's something that's really mislaid, right? Like the best program in the world, someone will say, is 5 by 5, 5 reps of 5 sets with a squat. Like, that's what you need to do. And they haven't even mentioned the intensity.
You've
Like,
just left it to interpretation, which
yeah.
is going to get such a varied result.
Oh yeah, and so you really, the reps are gonna change a lot, and we do that a lot. Like even though at the moment we're running for a program, like we're doing clusters. So at the moment we're doing 12 sets of one, right? It allows us to have a high intensity and repeat that high intensity to a higher volume than you normally can with normal rep ranges. But like bear in mind that if someone comes in who's totally fresh, well, that won't really work for them. So we're gonna have to change that up with them. We're gonna have to say something. Okay, well, we're gonna get you to do 8 to 10 reps with 4 in reserve for now. Understand your reps and reserves, learn that, and then progress forward and to higher intensities.
100%. And you're going to need that. You're going to need that specificity and those constraints, especially after you've been lifting for a while. And if you notice that you're starting to slow down, these are things to reflect against. Like, am I actually training hard enough?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people say, "Yeah, I am," but are you, bro? Are you? And this is a learned habit. Like once you truly know what a 1 RM is or a 3 rep max, you can understand that reps in reserve scheme so much more accurately, and you can have a better like subjective judgment to it. Same with like volume too. Like these are all things that we'll have to volume, frequency, intensity that we have to learn to manage and control. We can't have all of these things at the same time. We need to fluctuate these at different times. So it's very hard to be lifting 100% max for like 20 reps, right? It's going to crush us unless you're doing a cluster scheme. Where was I? Or the opposite, right? To be doing like, I don't know. I lost my train of thought here.
I was going, yeah, off that,
Same here. I
get your
lost my
train
train
of
of thought.
thought, and
Thank
I'm
you.
going to jump in because, well, you can't have them all. You can't have while you can't have them all at the same time, you want them all at the same time, but you can't have one climbing massively and expect the other two to be just as high. So it's kind of like an interchangeable scale because, for example, if I have really, really high volume, well, I'm going to have to drop off the intensity. Yep, and I'm probably going to have to drop off the frequency. Yep, but at the same time, I need to make sure that intensity is still in the background worthwhile. Because if I say to someone, if Mitch just mentioned how you might say to someone, they're saying, I train really hard, and he said, are you? Because one of the biggest mistakes people will make is they'll confuse just doing one of these on their own too high with hard work. And I'll give you an example. Well, I went into the gym and my intensity was extremely low, right? So, but I did a lot of volume. I did 10 tons of work, but none of that work was at a high enough intensity for me to get a stimulus, right? So then I went too high on volume and not high enough on intensity. And it could be the same thing as I went in and I worked really hard today. Well, what did you do? Well, I did 1 rep maxes until I was broke, right? Well, again, same kind of thing. You probably did so much intensity that you probably didn't do actually enough of volume at that intensity. And then we could say that another guy who came in and he trained for an hour and a half and he just trained at extremely high frequency, did loads of work, but all that work was at such a low volume and such a low intensity together to actually make any appropriate work. And like the idea there is that you actually have to play with all three of them at all times because they're all very important. No one is without the other, but there is a time where we might prioritize one higher than the other. But that doesn't mean the other one is gone ever. Like they all three of them have to be playing into each other at the time. And this is kind of where we get to like junk volume, right? That guy that trains for an hour and a half every day but doesn't really do much volume and intensity because it would be impossible. He's just building up a bunch of junk volume, right?
Wasting your time, dude.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Like, that's a lot of waste of time. Some of that time probably isn't wasted, but later on down the line, it will definitely be wasted.
A really cool way to kind of manage this is to manage it. Is to write it down. Is to track it. And like this doesn't have to be crazy, right? Like if you, most programs will have a main movement, like a movement that is reflective of are we making progress? And it's generally the first movement of the program. And that's like the minimal thing to look at and track. You write down like the set, how many sets you've done of it, how many reps, what weight. You'll write feedback to like how many reps you had in your back pocket, or even like comments of like how you felt. Like, did it feel pretty good? Was there any discomfort or whatever extra additional notes that you would like to put in? And this is awesome to reflect against because a good program will have a lot of stability throughout it and have small changes for a couple of weeks. So if you have, say, session A on week 1 and then you do session A on week 2, guess what? You've now got a framework that you can build off. So you can look back at your past results and go, oh, you know what? To get progress, I want to beat this. It doesn't have to be by a massive amount. It can be by a small effort, a marginal increase of intensity or volume. And if you get one of those wins, guess what? You're threading the needle in the right direction. And I write my new comments down, and guess what I'm doing in week 3? I've got a newer framework, an updated framework to try and work off and to try and beat. And again, if I can do this compounded by 8 to 12, whatever weeks, well, you know what? You've made some beautiful progress from week 1 to 12. And that's a celebratory win if you can kind of get linear progress throughout all those weeks. That can be huge.
Yeah, and it comes down to also asking yourself questions like when you aren't making progress anymore. If you're tracking, then you will be able to recognize the pattern inside that training. You'll be able to say, okay, well, that's exactly why I'm not doing it. I went over the top there. I didn't get work hard enough there, and so on and so forth. So you've got kind of a timeline. You can do like a forensic report on why you're not actually improving, right?
That's huge. I love it. And you can go like more in depth of this. Like, God, I appreciate the Excel people. I think they're amazing. I'm not one of them myself. I'd like to be, but like,
Well, you won't need to soon, Mitch. You just better use AI for your Excel
oh, I
sheets.
look forward to scan me and just update all I've done and just uploads and says, wouldn't that be great? Holy crap. And it just advise every single change that you need to make.
Oh yeah.
Have this meal at this time, sleep at this time. I'll dim lit your room.
I didn't mean that for
I'll
AI.
make,
I meant with the Excel spreadsheets.
oh,
But
good,
yeah,
good, good, good. I'm going like an AI that takes care of my life.
Yeah.
That's what
yeah.
I'm looking forward to.
Your AI personal assistant. I think there is things that do that, but from my understanding with AI and trying to use it at the moment, it's not up to scratch yet. But I look forward to it improving.
I think, I don't know,
Definitely.
20 years maybe time. We'll see where it's at.
I reckon sooner. Hopefully.
Yeah, but
because it'd be nice to use it as a tool more often.
To what you were saying there, to just to update what your program and chuck it in Excel, that'd be fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful data, but it's like data. You don't want data for the sake of data. You want data for accuracy, right? So if you do have a set goal, we can look at certain metrics through our tracking to go, all right, are these areas growing or are they staying stagnant? And like we said earlier at the start of this, if it's staying stagnant for about 2 weeks or more, we're in a plateau, baby, and we need to shake and bake and we need to find other ways to create stimulus. So this might be being reflective. Like if we're looking back at the whole thing, we might be shaking things up too much and throwing shit at it. We might not have our nutrition on point. We might not be actually doing the program enough to get the effort, or we might be doing it too much. So we've got to kind of
Yeah.
find out the level of adherence. And then all those things are in check, I've got to look at the more of the nuances in my programming, the exercise selection, the intensity, the frequency, the volume, all these sorts of things to see what can I change to get a better result to my progress.
100%. Definitely. So I think that touches on anything else with program image.
I'm sure there's some
I
we've
feel
missed,
that
but I feel like it's pretty well rounded.
we have a note here of unrealistic expectations, and
Mm.
I do think that is extremely important as well. Like we speak about plateaus, and we speak about someone hitting like a 2 to 3 week plateau, and that's when we might have to change things up. We also have to understand that some people just have unrealistic expectations, and I can't. I see this so much. I see this kind of like, oh, what was your previous best? When I'm asking someone when we're testing, and they'll say, oh, it was 90, and then I'll say, okay, so what do you want to achieve today? And in a way, I'm leading them into what I think they're going to do. And they're like, okay, well, 115. I say, so have you done anything heavier than 90 ever? And they'll be like, no. You'd be like, so where
Walk
did you
me
get
through
this? Like,
this,
wait,
yeah.
1 second. Like, explain to me where you got this number from. Because what's his name does this. Okay, well, that has nothing to do with you at this moment. And that's you probably just over guesstimating your abilities at this moment in time. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I'm also saying like it's probably not worth the risk reward of us jumping our intensity that high that quickly. So quite often it's people set these very unrealistic expectations for how quickly things should happen. And there's a lot of things to be blamed there. There's a lot of things, but people taking anecdotal information too heavily, where people are inherently over exaggerators, right? Like that does happen when someone tells you stuff. So you have to take into consideration that you need to look at that tracking, them numbers that you have, and you have to be like, okay, what is an actual good improvement? And I really like the kind of analogy of if I'm a carpenter, for example, and I'm measuring twice and cutting once, I'm still going to make sure that I kind of cut that wood a little bit too long at first, right? Because then I can take the little cuts off. If I cut it too short, then I'm done, and I'm gonna have to cut a new piece of wood. So I like the idea of like cutting a little bit too long, cutting a little bit too long, cutting a little bit too long. Boom, that's perfect, done. And then you don't overcook people.
Worst thing is you overshoot and you overestimate yourself, and then set one you've already failed, and then you're like, crap,
Yeah,
shit.
and people overshoot all the time, and that
Uh,
could be one of the biggest issues why people don't make progress. Like we were just having a conversation the other day, and we were discussing how actually always going 100% won't make you improve. Yeah, and it'll burn you out too much. Where if you actually work quite often at like 75 to 85 to 90% and up and down around there, you will improve your one rep max more so than if you always go for ones. And if you're always going for ones, you better make sure that your nutrition, your adherence, everything is on point. But if you're going for these kind of 75s to 95s, well, there's a little bit more space for failure in them. Failure is a strong word, but there's a little bit more space for actually not being perfect at everything.
and I know we touched on this point earlier, but just a
Like, right,
good time to bring it back up. You're not the same as you were 10, 15, 20 years ago. So even you're in your early 20s, late teens, you can maybe get away with some of that stuff because how adaptable that young body is. But trying to do one reps constantly in your 30s, in your 40s, yeah, shit slows down, dude, and it gets a lot harder. We need to look after ourselves a bit better. So that you 10, 15, 20 years ago versus you now is a different person. And there are different requirements because of your lifestyle, your age, your other commitments, and you have to take that in consideration. I'm not going to say go do some bloody jazz aerobics or whatever. Still train hard and crush it, but you need to have proper context in mind to what type of training you need to yield the best results.
and the people that I see make progress all the way through their 30s, 40s, and 50s are the people that don't train harder anymore. They actually just train smarter. Like, and they make continuous progress. And there is a time where you have to kind of think, well, actually, well, I need this reserve recovery. So you have your recovery amount and if you just always work to the absolute recovery where your nutrition and adherence and everything on the background, how you socialize and everything has to be 100% perfect on point. If you always work at that and there's no room for error, when you do error, you're gonna die in the arse a little bit, and you're gonna really struggle to get back into that onto that same way again. If you leave this little bit of a space for recovery, well, when all of a sudden for some reason the wife says that you can't go to work, you can't go train, you have to look after the kids, or you have to do this, or we've just got this we have to do now, we have to pick up an extra few hours at work 'cause work's busy, all these things that might just happen in your life. well, then we have space for that and we can still improve whether this happens or not.
That's pretty good, man.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Anything else we want to add?
No, I think like a recap would be awesome, like a quick recap. So what we spoke about today was the 4 reasons you might not be making progress, right? And it's so important that we do dial in the nutrition to some level, right? We do in adherence, number one most important thing, right? Where we discussed that, like
All hail
nothing
adherence.
happens unless you adhere to that nutrition and to your training, and they are allowing you some space for life, right? And just for you as an individual, correct? Like you have to enjoy this stuff enough to be able to keep doing it. Yep. And then the other one, obviously, programming. Make sure your program is on point and it's pushing you in the right direction. Because what a waste of time if it's not. And stop listening to dumb shit. I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
it's going to be up there with adherence for how important it is.
Dude, worth going down your gram or whatever your media of choice is and just purge and
Oh yeah,
deleting,
good idea.
delete.
Everyone that you see doing a barbell back squat on a bow will delete it.
Delete.
Everyone that tells you that you need to get big calorie burn, delete it. What else? What else do we delete?
Oh, just that the call of this one thing. Delete. Go on.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah, do this, don't do this, delete.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
It'll really cull some bullshit out of your life.
Yeah, all right.
We go for a purge after this.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
deleting. All right.
Okay.
All the best, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
Wish you the best.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.